Telecommunications fraud, particularly voice phishing, operates on an industrial scale. It drains billions from the economy and targets vulnerable populations with increasingly sophisticated social engineering. This document details the Korean government's legislative countermeasure, an amendment to Article 84-2 of the Telecommunications Business Act. It outlaws providing services or manufacturing devices capable of falsely displaying or spoofing the sender's phone number, intended to stop criminals masking international calls. However, in the rush to enforce this rule, a sweeping unintended consequence emerged. Regulators and the media began implicitly treating all enterprise-grade mobile VoIP gateways as illegal spoofing devices, branding them with the catch-all term SIM boxes. This regulatory dragnet is based on a technical misunderstanding of how cellular networks and enterprise hardware actually function. By attempting to cut off the hardware supply for criminals, the state has accidentally criminalized standard telecommunications infrastructure, failing to account for network architecture. The specific hardware caught in this regulatory crossfire are the mobile VoIP gateways, manufactured by OpenVox and imported by True Networks. These devices are essential routing tools utilized by enterprise call centers to manage high volumes of customer communications across different cellular bands. In reality, these machines sit in professional IT environments, processing legitimate commercial traffic, yet regulators classify them alongside malicious network intrusion tools. This brings us to the question: does this high-end enterprise machine actually possess the capacity to execute caller ID spoofing outlawed by Article 84-2? To answer that, we have to move past regulatory assumptions and examine the hard-coded rules that govern modern Korean cellular networks. If the hardware physically and systemically lacks the ability to alter a caller's number, then the premise for seizing these devices collapses. Every mobile connection relies on a strict technical constraint, the IMSI, or International Mobile Subscriber Identity. This is a unique, unalterable serial number hard-coded directly onto a physical USIM card. When a call center agent initiates a VoIP call, the audio routes into the gateway and pairs with one of the internal modem modules, which houses a legally registered USIM. At the moment the call attempts to leave the gateway, a handshake occurs. The cellular tower interrogates the USIM strictly for its IMSI to authenticate the connection. The cellular network generates and verifies the 010 caller ID based on that SIM card. The gateway machine cannot determine or inject this number. Regulators operate under the assumption that these machines take an internet-based 070 number and forcibly overwrite it with a fake 010 number before sending it to the tower. That is technically impossible on a secure network. The gateway initiates a direct outward call using the legally registered 010 USIM installed inside its chassis. Because caller ID is strictly controlled by the telecom network's authentication of the physical SIM card, spoofing a number at the gateway level is systemically impossible. Criminals do successfully spoof numbers, but they rely on two specific illicit firmware tools to bypass network rules: IMEI alteration and remote SIM bank tethering. Every modem has an IMEI, a digital fingerprint. Altering it allows a device to constantly change its identity to evade network blacklists once a carrier detects suspicious activity. However, the OpenVox models imported by True Networks entirely lack the firmware capabilities to alter IMEIs. They cannot scrub their digital fingerprints. Furthermore, these models lack the ability to integrate with remote SIM banks. This means the USIM and the modem are permanently paired in a single, physical location. Without IMEI manipulation or remote SIM banking, these devices lack the technical prerequisites to execute the crimes described in the amendment. Once the technical constraints are clear, the issue shifts to how the statute is interpreted. We have to look at the strict statutory definitions within the Telecommunications Business Act. Law firm Lin provided a formal legal interpretation regarding the exact parameters of Article 84-2, specifically addressing how enterprise routing functions under the law. Call centers rely on internal PBX management. Agents use internal private extension numbers to route their audio over a local network to the gateway. The law requires us to delineate the boundary between an internal company identifier, like an extension, and a public electrical telecommunication number assigned by the government. The legal argument presented by regulators conflates the bridging of a private internal extension with external caller ID spoofing. The firm's legal conclusion is direct. Originating a call to the outside world using your own legally registered, unmodified 010 USIM is not falsely displaying a number. Legally, bridging a VoIP call through a registered network node does not constitute spoofing. Equating standard PBX management with financial fraud ignores the statutory definition of a telecommunication number. Documentation of these open Vox devices exists within historical government records, placing their operation beyond the realm of legal theory. Any broadcasting or communication equipment brought into South Korea must undergo the stringent KC certification process managed by the National Radio Research Agency, or RRA. This official RRA certification proves True Network's OpenVox UC300 equipment passed compliance testing as far back as 2017. This subsequent document shows the expanded VSGW2120 slot case model receiving the exact same regulatory approval in 2018. And this recent 2023 certification confirms that the modern VSGW-P2120 model maintains ongoing operational compliance with current network standards. These documents prove the hardware has repeatedly passed rigorous domestic compatibility and safety testing over a span of 6 years. A device cannot simultaneously be a fully compliant, heavily tested, government-certified piece of enterprise infrastructure and a dedicated black market hacking tool. However, examining the actual methodology of modern voice phishing syndicates reveals a sharp departure from those professional enterprise environments. This is the physical evidence of confiscated criminal setups. They do not use heavy, expensive server racks. Modern syndicates rely on clusters of second-hand consumer smartphones. These devices are easily modified with illegal apps and controlled remotely from overseas via cloud servers. Criminals abandoned enterprise VoIP hardware precisely because it is too expensive and lacks the illicit firmware required to execute a spoofing attack. Smuggling heavy enterprise gear represents a massive financial liability if confiscated. A suitcase full of disposable, second-hand consumer phones can be abandoned with minimal loss. Phishing syndicates have evolved past enterprise hardware. The current regulatory crackdown on VoIP gateways is obsolete in the fight against actual telecommunications crime. Enforcing Article 84-2 against enterprise hardware has created a destructive paradox. This infographic illustrates the impact. Legitimate VoIP solution providers and call centers are seeing their certified, essential equipment unjustly blocked at customs. Meanwhile, the criminal syndicates simply smuggle consumer phone parts via small-scale shipments, entirely unaffected by the gateway ban. The OpenVox gateways imported by True Networks are technically incapable of spoofing caller ID. They are legally compliant, certified nodes in a standard PBX network. Ultimately, when blunt regulations are based on technical misunderstandings, they damage domestic industries while missing the actual perpetrators. To combat telecommunications fraud, regulators must align legal definitions with modern network realities, rather than criminalizing the foundational, certified architecture of the enterprise call center.